som vám rada predstavila nášho hlavného hostia, a to odborníka na pastoráciu a zakladateľa organizácie Pastoral Innovation Georga. On s dlhoročnými skúsenostiami v oblasti pastorácie pomáha farnostiam po celom svete zapojiť mladých a prinášať nové impulzy do cirkevného života. Tak, Georg, nech sa páči. Teraz the floor is yours. A budeme tu mať medzi nami aj Katku Petrovičovú, ktorá vlastne Georgovi aj prekladá, čo teda on nerozumie slovy po slovensky a bude prekladať aj tento čas s Georgom, ktorý budeme mať aj na obednom workshope. Takže nech sa páči.
Dobrý deň. Hello, and thank you very much for inviting me to this conference.
Zdravím vás a som veľmi vďačný, ďakujem za pozvanie na túto konferenciu.
I have already been given very much by you.
Už teraz som dostal veľmi veľa od vás.
And just a few examples, I had a wonderful talk with Juraj when we were driving up from Bratislava.
Len jeden z príkladov, mal som veľmi pekný rozhovor s Jurajom, keď sme išli z Bratislavy.
And I had a wonderful supper with the whole team that prepared everything.
A mal som aj príjemnú večeru s celým tímom, ktorý toto všetko pripravil.
I could celebrate Mass with you with the wonderful children's choir.
Mohol som s vami slaviť svätú omšu s tým nádherným zborom detským.
I heard a great homily which I didn't understand.
ktorú som nerozumel.
So maybe I can give back a little bit from what I have been given to you.
Tak môžem vám dať späť aspoň niečo z toho, čo som od vás dostal.
Because of course I'm from Austria and I'm a stranger in Slovakia.
Lebo samozrejme, ja som z Rakúska a preto som cudzí na Slovensku.
And so you are the experts for the field of work in the church where you work.
Takže vy ste tu experti v tom poli, kde pracujete, práca s mladými.
But through the exchange of experiences, each one of us can go home a little bit richer than you came.
Ale práve vďaka zdieľaniu týchto skúseností môže každý z nás odísť domov obohatený.
So in the beginning I will tell a little bit about myself.
Na začiatku poviem niečo o sebe, predstavím sa.
So what do you see on this picture? Any idea?
Tak čo vidíte na tom
Just
obrázku?
describe what you see and you can speak Slovak and translate.
Opíšte, čo vidíte na tom obrázku, ja to preložím. Predia po slovensky.
Yes, cross. And the cross is wrapped into some...
Takže kríž je zahalený. There was light also.
Yes, and
so it's covered, it's wrapped, but still, full of light.
that's the cross. Yes, it's wrapped in
Takže to je kríž.
yellow cloth, and here is a forklift.
To je látke.
And the person who is driving the forklift is now Archbishop of Salzburg, Franz Lachner.
A ten človek, ktorý šoferuje ten vysokozdvižný vozík, to je dnes biskup Salzburgu.
He's a Franciscan, and he was auxiliary bishop in Graz before he became Archbishop in Salzburg.
Predtým, ako sa stal arcibiskupom v Salzburgu, bol pomocným biskupom v Gráci.
And before he became a priest in the Franciscan, he was a normal worker, an electrician. He had a permit to drive forklifts.
Takže predtým, než sa vôbec stal kňazom a františkánom, bol elektrikár a preto vlastne vedel vôbec riadiť tento vysokozdvižný vozík.
He grew up close to the border to Hungary, and at that time there was the Iron Curtain.
Vyrástol nedaleko hranice s Maďarskom a vtedy tam ešte bola železná opona.
And so there was a lot of poverty in this area.
V tejto oblasti bola veľká chudoba.
And I'm showing you this because in 2013 Pope Benedict announced the Year of Faith.
A ja vám to ukazujem, pretože v roku 2013 pápež František vyhlásil rok viery.
And at that time I was responsible in our diocese for everything that had to do with communication and media and press work.
A A v tom období som ja bol zodpovedný za všetko, čo v našej farnosti malo dočinenia s komunikáciou a tlačovými správami a podobne.
So our job was to make church affairs known and for people who don't go to church.
Takže našou úlohou bolo oboznámiť ľudí, aj tých, ktorí nie sú v cirkvi, alebo nepoznajú cirkev s tým, čo sa deje v našom kostole.
Which in the Western world is not very easy, because a lot of media, they would write about church affairs, but only about negative.
Čo teda v západnej cirkvi nie je jednoduché, pretože veľké množstvo tlače píše síce o cirkvi, ale iba o tých negatívach.
And positive things only when they were local, but negative things when they were local, also national and international.
Takže o tých pozitívnych veciach sa píše možno aj v nejakých lokálnych médiách a o tých zlých sa píše aj v lokálnych médiách, ale aj na celoštátnej úrovni.
Who could move this column? No way.
You just said it on me.
It's really a symbol for our church work, right? There's always something in the way.
To je skutočne symbol pre našu prácu v cirkvi. Vždycky je to niečo v ceste.
And some things we can move, and others, if we move them, it's risky.
That's the cornerstone.
Yeah, it's a cornerstone. It's statically not necessary.
Bolo veľa riskantné to pohnúť, lebo je to ten základný kameň, ktorý všetko drží.
But really, it's a symbol. If you want to innovate and renew church, there will always be resistance. There will always be boundaries and problems.
Ale myslím to vážne, že je to symbol pre cirkev, alebo teda pre to, čo robíme, pretože vždy, keď chcete niečo obnoviť, tak je tu...
It's like when you're sailing in the big lake here in Lipovac, and you have the wind against you. It's impossible to sail against the wind directly.
Áno, že ako je napríklad nemožné plaviť sa na plachetnici priamo proti vetru.
But you can learn how to cross sail and deal with problems. So if I run into the column, it's not the column's fault, right? Or if I break away the column and everything breaks down, it's also not the column's fault. But I can deal differently with it. Okay?
Takže nemôžem síce ísť priamo proti vetru, ale viem sa naučiť manévrovať okolo tých problémov. A keď napríklad narazím do toho slúpa alebo ho zlobím a všetko spadne, tak to nie je problém toho slúpu.
So our problem was, at that time already, how do we evangelize? How do we tell the good news to everybody, not just to church people? Because there were less and less church people.
Takže vtedy, keď som pracoval v čase teda fotografie, bol náš problém, ako evangelizovať ľudí, ako povedať o Bohu aj ľuďom, ktorí nie sú veriaci.
And there were more and more de-churched people, and then even unchurched people who had no idea, because they were already kids from de-churched people.
Takže boli tu ľudia, ktorí odišli z cirkvi a boli tu ale aj ľudia, ktorí už vôbec nevedeli o cirkvi, lebo to boli deti tých ľudí, ktorí odišli a nechceli mať cirkvi.
When I was young, there were still many church people. We call it Volkskirche, Church of the People. So it was just normal to be Catholic, to go to church, to pray, to believe in God, and to practice.
Keď som bol malý, tak ešte bolo strašne veľa ľudí veriacich, bolo to niečo ako že ľudová cirkev alebo taká tradičná.
But on a general scale, that's gone.
Ale vo všeobecnosti to už teraz neexistuje.
And it became more and more important to have the chance to find to a personal relationship to God, to personal faith.
A stalo sa mnoho dôležitejším pomôcť ľuďom nájsť osobný vzťah k Bohu.
So what we did here, we said, how can we make topics like faith or gospel or church or God interesting, attractive to unchurched and de-churched people?
Takže na čím sme rozmýšľali bolo, ako spraviť tieto témy, Boh, cirkev, ako ich spraviť zaujímavými aj pre ľudí, ktorí z cirkvi odišli alebo ju už nepoznajú.
How can they become curious?
Ako môžeme v nich vzbudiť záujem?
So we made something which we call a paradox intervention.
Tak sme urobili niečo, čo sme nazvali, alebo čo je paradoxnou intervenciou.
So we hid what we wanted to show.
Takže sme zakryli to, čo sme chceli ukázať.
So we wrapped the cross into a cloth so you couldn't see it.
A práve preto sme zahalili kríž, aby ho nebolo vidieť.
Into a yellow cloth.
Do žltej látky.
And so people got curious, what is this?
Takže ľudia boli zvedaví, čo to je.
And we didn't just do it here, this was the presentation at the big diocesan meetings, 3,000 parish council members, priests, other employed people in the church and engaged people.
A neurobili by sme to iba tu na tomto veľkom stretnutí ľudí, ktorí majú niečo s cirkvou.
And we invited, hey, if you want to participate in this action, we will provide you with everything necessary, and you're invited to wrap signs like the cross or signs of faith like little chapels that are all over the place in Austria. Wrap it in Lent like we normally do it in the church building, right? We wrap the crosses with cloth.
Takže na tejto akcii sme to ukázali ľuďom a pozvali sme ich, ak aj vy sa chcete do toho zapojiť a na miestach, kde ste, zahaliť počas pôstu kríže, tak ako to robíme aj v kostole, tak vám zabezpečíme látku, zabezpečíme vám osobnosti.
So, people who don't go to church still see those signs and they suddenly realize them, recognize them. Many people afterwards said, I was driving the same road every day, commuting to work or to school or whatever. I never saw that there was a sign of faith, a cross, a chapel, or whatever.
Takže keď to potom ľudia, ktorí nechodili do kostola, uvideli, tak zrazu začali zaujímať. Napríklad jeden človek povedal, že roky som chodil jednou cestou do práce, ale nikdy som si nevšimol, že je tam nejaké znamenie viery, nejaký kríž.
And suddenly I saw this yellow cloth and I thought, what is this?
A zrazu som videl túto žltú látku a pýtal som sa, čo to má znamenať.
Oh, this is a cross.
Aha,
like people realized. Why did they do that? What does it mean? What is the? And then journalists came up to us and said, "What are you doing? Is this your action?"
Hej, a zrazu sa
They became curious too.
Čo to je? A prišiel tam dokonca reportéri a začali sa zaujímať, čo to má znamenať.
And that's how a whole avalanche started. We just kicked it off with very little means, and then internally, a lot of people like you said, hey, that's cool, I want to be a part of that. It was not compulsory. I told the bishop, not compulsory. I said, I'm not a bishop, I cannot tell anybody anything. I cannot order. Me and my team, we can just offer, invite, and make it attractive internally. And then by this leverage, it became very well known. So experts told me later, this action and all the recognition we got, all the interest, all the talks, the discussions, the dialogues about faith would have cost you millions of euros if you had done it in a normal marketing way. Sorry.
Takže začali sme s veľmi málo prostriedkami a začali sme vlastne interne v cirkvi, začali sme to ponúkať ľuďom a dôležité bolo, to som povedala biskupovi, že nechcem, aby to bolo povinné, nech to robia iba tí, ktorí chcú, ale tak sa to začalo šíriť a potom až neskôr mi experti povedali, že všetok ten záujem, tí reportéri, ktorí za nami chodili, ľudia, ktorí chceli vedieť, o čo ide, toto všetko by ste s platenými zdrojmi dosiahli len za veľké peniaze.
Because it just took off, it went viral. People just posted videos and talks and discussions they had. They wrote in their church papers. They had dialogue meetings. All religious teachers in school talked about it, and many were participating, and they let young people give testimony. So it was just a real cool action.
Takže a potom to ale naozaj ľudia prebrali, stalo sa to virálne, vyšlo to po internete, rozprávali o tom katechéti, o tom v lokálnych médiách.
And even we started it in our diocese, and we have 9 dioceses in Austria, like the federal states basically, and all the others joined in too.
Takže v Rakúsku máme 9 diecéz a začali sme to tu a všetci ostatní sa pridali.
So like this one, this person here, that's at that time he was bishop in Tyrol, so in the western Austria.
Tak napríklad tá osoba v čiernom strede bola v tom čase biskup v Tyrolsku.
Now he is bishop in Upper Austria, but he is also a mountaineer, so he hiked up to the highest mountain of Austria, the Großkirchner, 3,700 and something meters.
Takže teraz je biskup Horného Rakúska, ale okrem toho je telozreca, teda turista, takže vyliezol na najvyšší vrch Rakúska.
And he wrapped the crucifix here.
A aj tam vlastne zahľadal ten kríž.
And as you can see, it's not yellow, it's purple. And honestly, that was the trick.
Ako vidíte, toto tu nie je žltá látka, ale fialová, a toto bol trik.
Because you might ask yourself, hey, don't think just you have good ideas. I have cool ideas too. But those stupid priests and bishops don't check it.
Hej.
Excuse me, please, Rachel.
Že bolo to o tom, že ty máš super alebo ty máš cool nápady, ja mám cool nápady, ale tí hlúpi kňazi to nechápu.
Because, you know, if people always have a lot of ideas, and not all of them are good, but some of them are good, but they don't get the majority.
Lebo inovatívni ľudia majú vždy veľa nápadov a nie všetky sú dobré, ale niektoré z nich sú dobré.
So that happened to me all the time. So 9 out of 10 ideas, there's nothing, they just fail.
A teda tí ľudia s nápadmi často nedostanú tieto nápady k väčšine, že aj mne sa stalo, že 9 z 10 nápadov neprešlo.
And here the trick was, when we had the final meeting, where the decision was made in our diocese with the bishop and all the prelates and everybody, I presented the idea. Of course, I talked with the bishop before and other people, but at the end I said, the only thing we still don't know if we should use yellow or purple. Because normally it's purple in the church.
Takže keď sme mali to záverečné stretnutie so všetkými dôležitými ľuďmi, kde sme mali rozhodnúť, tak ja som samozrejme predtým som rozprával so všetkými ľuďmi, ale to jediné, čo sme ešte nevedeli, bolo, máme použiť fialovú alebo žltú látku.
And then the prelate, a friend of mine who was at that time priest of the cathedral, he jumped up. He said, Georg, you cannot do it yellow. That's impossible. We have to do it in purple.
A vtedy jeden z prelátov vyskočil a povedal, Georg, to nemôžete urobiť v žltej farbe, musí to byť vo fialovej.
So the whole group, about 30 people, they were just discussing yellow or purple. So it wasn't if we should do it, but how.
Takže v tom bode už celá skupina diskutovala o tom, že bude to fialová alebo žltá. Už to nebolo o tom či, ale ako.
Yeah. So this experience was to me the kick-off for doing something new.
A toto stretnutie bolo pre mňa takým nakopnutím k tomu, aby som začal robiť niečo nové.
And to live my vocation, a church vocation, in a different way.
A aby som žil moje povolanie v cirkvi novým spôsobom.
So I quit my diocesan job, which was a great job and well paid, well, for church standards, and you know, with securities, with status and everything, I quit it.
Takže som opustil svoju prácu v diecéze, ktorá na tej cirkevnej pomere bola dobre platená.
Not because there was a conflict or a problem,
nie kvôli nejakému konfliktu alebo problému,
but because I had this enormous joy how it is possible to renew the church.
Ale pretože som mal takú neskutočnú radosť z toho, že je možné obnoviť cirkev.
How it is possible to inspire people and motivate them to pull on a common string.
Z toho, ako je možné inšpirovať ľudí a potiahnuť ich.
And how to combine all our time and talents and whatever we are given in our individuality for a common goal.
A ako je možné spojiť všetky naše talenty, náš čas, všetko, čo máme pre jeden spoločný cieľ.
How it is possible to get people curious who maybe say, I'm an atheist, or I don't believe in the church, or the church has so much abuse, I cannot work with them.
Ako je možné zaviať ľudí, ktorí sa o cirkev nezaujímajú, alebo ktorí hovoria, že je tam toľko zla, toľko zneužívania.
And get to a new form of dialogue and evangelization and spreading the good news in today's world.
A začať novú formu dialogu aj evangelizácie, rozširovania Božieho slova v dnešnom svete.
And suddenly realize a lot of maybe people or institutions or whatever, that media that we consider as against the church, as enemies, it's possible to turn them into partners.
A zrazu som pochopil, že veľa ľudí, inštitúcií alebo médií, o ktorých si myslíme, že sú proti cirkvi, ako sa nám vlastne môžu stať partnermi.
I'm sure that with the work of eRko, if the vision of let's turn to our children, let's help our children and families to lead a good life under today's circumstances, this vision will find a lot of partners.
A myslím si napríklad aj to, že práca eRka, to obrátenie sa na deti, na rodiny a na to, ako môžeme s nimi žiť dobrý život v tejto dobe, že aj táto vízia nájde veľa partnerov.
So, how much time do we have left?
Takže koľko máme času, koľko času nám vystáva?
Because that was the first 2 minutes.
Máme prvé 2 minúty.
Just kidding. So now I have 3 parts. The first part is like an analysis, like the situation we start from. The third part is innovation tools, and the second part is how do we deal with the pluralistic situation we are in our society. So there is no homogeneous people or church life or whatever anymore.
Takže moja prezentácia má 3 časti. Prvou je analýza, druhou je to, ako sa vysporiadať s tou pluralitnou spoločnosťou v dnešnej dobe a tretia je o inovácii, o tom, ako môžeme postupovať.
And before we start that, I would invite you to build a bridge between what Pater Milan said and what we are doing now.
A predtým, než začneme, by som vás chcel pozvať, aby ste premostili to, čo hovoril Páter Milan s tým, čo budeme robiť teraz.
Pater Milan gave a wonderful presentation in a shortcut of the innovative phase of the church since the Second Vatican Council, I would call it.
Páter Milan nám odprezentoval v skratke úžasnú inováciu cirkvi, ktorá začala od Vatikánskym koncilom.
So now the Second Vatican Council took place from 1962 to 1965. Who was already alive at that time?
Takže druhý Vatikánsky koncil
bol
rok 1962. I don't believe you.
Is it really just me? Yeah. You two don't look like this. Wow. I was born in 63.
Takže ja som bol narodený v 63.
10 days before Pope John the 23rd died.
10 dní predtým, ako Jan 23. zomrel.
But for all the others here, it's history. It's long gone.
Ale pre všetkých ostatných je to dávno preč do histórie.
So that's why it was so valuable, Pater Milan, what you did. So I want to ask you now, is there anything of what Pater Milan said, where you said, hey, that kicked in, that I made a note, or that's something I want to take with me? And if there is, then please just let us know.
Takže preto je dôležité, čo nám Páter Milan povedal, a ja sa vás chcem spýtať, vidíte niečo, nejaké premostenie alebo niečo, čo sa vás dotklo, čo si chcete za sebou zobrať z toho, čo povedal? Prvne to môžete teraz povedať.
So please, is there anything where you said, hey, this kicked off a bell, this was important to me, I don't want to forget it?
Čokoľvek, čo vám tak ostalo znieť v hlave, srdci, že áno, to je dôležité dnes, že to si chcem zobrať, to mnou zarezonovalo.
And it doesn't matter if you have to think a little bit, because we can never remember everything. That's not so important. It's important that each one of you goes home from the whole menu that we have. Don't eat too much, that's not good. Just take what you say, that's valuable for my work, for my situation, for my process, for my thinking, for my believing. And the rest is nice, but it's not accurate right now.
A je v poriadku, ak si nepamätáte všetko, stačí si vybrať niečo, čo je relevantné pre vás v tejto situácii. And there was one thing, God is relationship.
Oh.
We have to listen to each other. We have to keep the relationship and discern. I listen to the Holy Spirit. Yeah, like love of brothers. To have an open heart. get interested also for non-believers. Look to the periphery.
Delenie sa s tým, čo som dostal.
Share what I was gifted, or my talents. Think about where the fears come from. And the parish should be a house between among houses. Again, put my talents into service. Look for new ways.
Wow. Father Milan, what do you say? Are you happy?
I said all of this.
That's great. And did you realize, I mean, that happened to me now, that this sharing, again, helped me to realize, oh yeah, that's true, that was good too. I wouldn't have thought of that. So it helped me to detect things on the menu that I would have overseen and that are important for me.
Vidíte, a to som si až teraz uvedomil, že mne sa to stalo, že všetko, čo ste, alebo veľa z tých vecí, ktoré ste povedali, som si uvedomil, že som si ani neuvedomil, že by som bol prekladal veľa vecí na menu.
So that's why the idea of synodality, it's a complicated word, but it's so basic.
A preto napriek tomu, že tá idea synodality je možno ťažké slovo, je to vlastne veľmi jednoduché, to všetko, čo hovoríte.
And what I will, at the end of my talk, when I talk about innovation tools,
na konci mojej prednášky aj budem hovoriť aj o prostriedkoch inovácie.
So we're trying to build a bridge between the profane world of innovation and the church world.
Takže tam, keď sa budem snažiť premostiť ten profánny svet inovácie a ten cirkevný svet inovácie,
that you will see that innovation usually is a team sport.
Vtedy uvidíte, že inovácia je väčšinou tímový šport.
So thank you for this exchange and keep on doing it. Whenever or whatever situation you are in, especially in one situation.
Tak, ďakujem za toto zdieľanie a neprestávajte to robiť. Vo všetkých situáciách, keď budete spolu,
especially in the situation before you give up.
Ale špeciálne v situácii predtým, než sa chcete vzdať.
I know this temptation, and you probably too, don't you?
Poznám toto pokušenie a vy ho asi tiež poznáte. Poznáte ho?
Sometimes you think it doesn't make any sense. It's not worth it.
Nedáva to zmysel, nefunguje to.
The fig tree just eats energy out of the soil, but it doesn't bring fruit.
Ten priemysel kováreň iba konzumuje energiu, ale nič neprináša.
So when that temptation comes, and I really think it's a temptation, it's a little demon on our shoulder, whispering in our ear.
Takže keď toto pokušenie príde, a to je skutočné pokušenie, je to naozaj démon tu na našom ramene,
then I'm sure God sends you one or two persons you can talk to.
A ja som si istý, že v tom momente vám Boh pošle niekoľko ľudí, jedno alebo dve osoby, s ktorými si môžete rozprávať.
There is somebody you can have this exchange.
Že tu bude niekto, s kým budete môcť mať toto zdieľanie.
There is somebody who listens to you.
Niekto, kto vám bude načúvať.
Lovingly and understands you.
S láskou a porozumením.
And that's usually the point where we can cross the valley and start going uphill again.
A to je väčšinou bod, kedy môžeme prekonať tú nížinu, alebo teda ten výlez a znova ísť hore.
And it happens more often to give up when you are individualistic and single and just me.
Mnoho častejšie sa stáva, že sa vzdáme, ak sme individualistickí.
Okay. Is that good?
Je to v poriadku?
So then let's move to, this will be a short part because many things are probably well known, but I just want to note them at the beginning in this analysis.
Takže presuneme sa k analýze, tá bude krátka, lebo veľa z tých vecí sa poznáte.
So this is the question for me.
Takže toto je pre mňa otázka. Prečo život v cirkvi už ďalej nemôže ísť tak, ako išiel predtým? A ako nás Boh stretáva v tom, čo je nové a odvážne?
Because it's normal for many people, they fear change and new things.
Pretože je pre väčšinu ľudí normálne, že sa boja zmeny a nových vecí.
But very often, among these new things and changes, God approaches us.
Ale veľmi často práve v týchto zmenách a nových veciach nám Boh prichádza v ústretí.
And in the spirit of discernment, we can discern whether it's God or not.
A v procese rozlišovania môžeme rozlišiť, že či je to Boh alebo nie.
But St. Paul says, check everything, and then, use the good.
Ale svätý Pavol hovorí, na všetko sa pozrite a potom sa rozhodnite, čo je dobré.
So, here's a grumpy cat. Why does it look so grumpy?
Takže tu je mrzutá mačka. Prečo vyzerá tak mrzuto?
That's very much from our Western experience, and Slovakia now belongs to the Western world now, but not always has. So, you, with your long history, a long common history with Austria, but then again, long decades of different history, very hard history.
A toto, čo teraz poviem, bude vychádzať vlastne zo skúsenosti západnej civilizácie, ku ktorej dnes už Slovensko patrí, aj keď to tak nebolo vždy v histórii.
So just look what I say now is also true for your context.
Tak teraz si rozmyslite, že či aj pre váš kontext platí to, čo teraz poviem.
So we see, for instance, those terms that you already mentioned, individualization, consumerism, polarization, unrest and violence, exploitation. Takže vidíme napríklad to, čo aj Adrián už spomenul, niekoľko vecí, individualizmus, konzumný spôsob života, polarizácia, nepokoje a násilie, vykorisťovanie. And I'm not talking about that everything is bad or negative, even if it's harming church life, but apparently the exaggeration of these developments has brought the whole mankind into real trouble.
A ja teraz nesnažím povedať, že všetko je zlé, aj keď to nejakým spôsobom zraňuje ten život v cirkvi, ale také zveličovanie týchto vecí veľmi uškodilo našej generácii.
For instance, the last term exploitation. Missio in Austria had a partnerland this year was Madagascar, this huge island.
Napríklad to posledné slovo vykorisťovanie pre papežské misijné dielo v Rakúsku bola tento rok zbierka pre Madagaskar.
And I learned that they have mines where children under extreme conditions dig for minerals that we all need in our smartphones and everywhere.
A napríklad som sa dozvedel, že tam na Madagaskare majú bane, kde malé deti ťažko pracujú, aby v baniach, aby vyťažujú minerály, ktoré my používame napríklad na
This is just terrible. In 2024, little kids cannot go to school, cannot lead a normal, healthy life because they are exploited. And we are, all of us, somehow interwoven in these sinful structures, like John Paul II said.
Takže ešte aj v roku 2024 niektoré deti sú takto zneužívané a nemôžu chodiť do školy, nemôžu mať svýchodný život a my sme nejakou súčasťou tiež tohto cyklu.
Just one example, you could probably add many, many more, globally or locally. If you look in your place, where does exploitation happen? Where is polarization happening? Unrest and violence and so on.
A toto je iba jeden príklad z mnohých, určite by ste vedeli doplniť ďalšie, či už celosvetovo alebo lokálne.
So, and then just a sidestep to the Generation Z, because we know this Generation Z is called sociologically the first generation that was experiencing the digital world from birth on internet and then smartphones.
A teraz mala odbočka dnešnej generácii Z, o ktorej sa v psychológii hovorí, že je prvá, ktorá vstúpila do digitálneho sveta.
So, you and I, for instance, is Generation Y, right?
Takže napríklad Juraj je generáciou Y.
I'm a boomer, so
ja som boomer.
way down. And then you have to deal with Generation Alpha. eRko.
A my musíme, alebo vy musíte pracovať s generáciou Alpha, ako eRko, ktoré prichádzajú.
This is still very new, and of course they have many aspects of Generation Z too.
A toto je veľmi nové, ale samozrejme majú aj veľa aspektov generácie Z.
But one common thing, which of course affects them differently. But one common thing is, ever since they live, they went through a lot of crises.
A jedna z charakteristík je, že odkedy sa narodili, tak prešli mnohými krízami.
So we have political crisis, economic crisis, ecological, psychological, a lot of depression, for instance, through corona and other things.
Takže politická, ekonomická kríza, ekologická, ale aj psychologické veci, veľa depresí.
And then we talked a lot about it yesterday in our car ride. The development since 2007, within 17 years, what smartphones changed in our lives was probably just too much and too quick and too overwhelming.
A to, o čom sme hovorili aj včera počas cesty, vývoj od roku 2007, len za tých 17 rokov bol extrémny a veľmi rýchly, čo sa týka smartfónov.
So probably nobody would say it's all bad or it's all good. It depends, right?
Takže asi nikto nepovie, že je to celé zlé alebo celé dobré, hej, závisí. And
it's not just the kids that are somehow manipulated in a very, very strong way so they cannot even defend themselves. It's not just the kids. Yeah.
It is or it is not only kids?
That are manipulated.
Takže nie sú to iba deti, ktoré sú manipulované týmito smartfónmi a digitálnymi.
It's probably all of us because it's so convenient. That's why you turn it on. I use smartphone. I'm a heavy user of all kinds of apps because I'm traveling very much. It's really practical.
Hej, že sme to pravdepodobne my všetci, lebo mnohí z nás často používajú, ja sám často používam mnohé digitálne technológie, napríklad keď cestujem.
But at some point I realized, hey, I'm not a free person anymore.
A v nejakom bode som si uvedomil, počkať, ja už nie som slobodná osoba.
Because I'm bored and then I start looking at some reels.
Lebo napríklad nudím sa a začnem si pozerať nejaké reels, posty na sociálnych
or playing games, or watching whatever.
Alebo hrať hry, alebo čokoľvek pozerať.
And it just sucks you in, right? So it's very, very dangerous somehow.
A to vás tak vtiahne, vcúpne, je to veľmi nebezpečné.
And in the meantime, there are scientific studies from neurologists that prove that it makes you addictive, and it's made that way intentionally.
Dnes časom už máme aj napríklad neurologické štúdie, ktoré hovoria, že ukazujú, že tieto technológie sú vybudované so zámerom, aby nás takto vtiahli.
Because the more amount of time you spend there, the more revenues they get.
Pretože čím viac času tam strávite, tým viacej dostanú tieto aplikácie späť.
And how to keep you focused on the smartphone, that's behind that is a very, very strong strategy.
Takže to je veľmi silná stratégia za tým, ktorá sa vás snaží čo najdlhšie pripútať telefónu.
And I'm sure in a couple of years, a lot of things will be regulated.
A ja som si istý, že v priebehu niekoľkých rokov mnohé z týchto vecí budú regulované.
For instance, smartphone use in schools.
Napríklad používanie smartfónov v školách.
Or like in Norway, I read that they want to forbid certain social media for kids below 15 years of age.
Alebo ako som čítal o Norsku, rozmýšľajú, že zakážu úplne používanie niektorých sociálnych médií pre deti do 15 rokov.
Because the Norwegian government is very child-friendly. Child protection is very important to them.
Pretože pre norskú vládu je veľmi dôležitá ochrana detí.
And they say, of course, kids today must learn to deal with the digital world and deal with apps and smartphones.
A hovoria, že áno, je samozrejme, že sa deti dnes musia naučiť pracovať s digitálnymi technológiami, smartfónmi.
Just as they have to learn to live in a world with car traffic, which is dangerous.
Presne tak, ako sa musia naučiť žiť vo svete, kde je premávka automobilová, ktorá je nebezpečná.
Or alcohol and cigarettes and other drugs.
Alebo alkohol, cigarety, iné drogy.
But just to reach that goal, you have to help them learn it, not just make it available to everybody from young age on.
Ale aby sme dosiahli tento cieľ, musíme ich naučiť, ako s tým pracovať a nie iba všetko otvoriť.
So this is a very disruptive development, what we call disruptive innovations. They disrupt the traditions, everything that was before. And smartphones and everything behind it have disrupted into the last family and house and community, our lives. Worldwide.
Takže toto môžeme zaradiť k inováciám, ktoré vidíme, že rozkladajú, ktoré prinášajú rozklad, prinášajú to do rodín, do vzťahov.
So again, it's not only good or bad, it's a very potent tool, a very strong tool, and you have to learn to use tools in a healthy way and not in a damaging way.
Takže vidíme opäť, že nie je to iba dobré alebo zlé, je to jednoducho prostriedok s veľkým potenciálom a my sa musíme naučiť využívať.
Okay, so this was a short look at the generation set, and there are many other aspects, and what I just wanted to help you understand that young people that you are dealing with are living in a completely different world than when you were young, when I was young. And unless we don't understand this world, it's hard to find the right strategies.
Takže toto bol len krátky vhľad do tejto generácie, sú tu samozrejme aj iné aspekty. A čo vám chcem pomôcť pochopiť je, že toto je úplne iný svet, ako ten, v ktorom ste vyrastali vy, a ak ho nepochopíme, tak nemôžeme pracovať s mládežou. Nebudeme schopní.
And as just a final line, the word future is among this generation predominantly negative.
A ešte posledná poznámka, pre túto generáciu je slovo budúcnosť prednostne, alebo negatívne.
And there are still a lot of dioceses who have renovation processes, renewal processes, and they call it future whatever.
A pritom stále mnohé farnosti majú tieto procesy obnovy, ktoré nazývajú, alebo ktoré majú v názve niečo s budúcnosťou.
And then they are wondering why young people don't kick in.
A potom rozmýšľajú o tom, že ako je možné, že mladí ľudia neprídu, keď sa to týka budúcnosti.
So just be in touch, be in a relationship, like Milan said. And I'm sure you're doing this, and try to understand the way they feel, they think. That's God in space, basically. The first sentence of God in space.
Takže presne to, ako hovoril Páter Milan, ostaňte, zdieľajte sa, ostaňte v kontakte. Tá prvá veta God in space, o ktorej hovorím.
Okay. And then also, church as it used to be, that's maybe something that you are very aware of, has changed a lot. So this is like a traditional church, right? And I'm not sure if it's a growing church, a lively church, a fruitful church.
A tiež cirkev, ako sme na ňu boli zvyknutí, určite máte s tým dočinenia, ja neviem, či táto farnosť je živá, alebo nie, ale je tradičná.
But what we realized in Austria, for instance, I say some, but maybe it's more and more. People are disappointed.
Čo som si uvedomil o Rakúsku, že nie iba niekoľkí, ale stále viacej a viacej ľudí je nespokojných.
So many teachers and unchurched people, if you talk with them, there is some sort of disappointment.
Takže u mnohých ľudí, keď sa s nimi rozprávate, je tam nejaký spôsob sklamania.
For instance, young adults in the US that have left the Catholic Church and joined another church, mostly evangelical churches.
Takže napríklad mladí ľudia v USA, ktorí odišli z katolíckej cirkvi a pripojili sa k iným cirkvám, väčšinou protestantským.
They said they didn't leave because it was too strict and too traditional or whatever. They said we left because nobody helped us to find a personal faith life. It was just formal, ritual. It was not personal.
Títo ľudia, ktorí odišli, povedali, že neodišli preto, že to bolo nejaké zastaré alebo príliš tradičné, ale odišli preto, že tam v tých cirkvách nebol nikto, kto by im pomohol, ako by ich priviedol do osobného vzťahu.
Some parishes are boring, aren't they?
Niektoré farnosti sú nudné, nie sú?
And Father Michael White, the author of this rebuilt book that I will present in the afternoon, and our partner parish in Baltimore, he says, church can be anything, but not all shouldn't be boring.
Takže Father Mike z farnosti Baltimore, s ktorou spolupracujeme, o ktorej je aj kniha Rebuilt, hovorí, že farnosť môže byť čokoľvek, ale nesmie byť nudná.
That doesn't mean that church should be just an entertainment event or just superficial.
A to teraz neznamená, že farnosť by mala byť iba nejaké zábavné podujatie alebo nejaká povrchná.
In the contrary, because if you look at the gospel, each piece of the gospel is not boring.
Práve naopak, je to o tom, že napríklad keď sa pozriete do Evanjelia, každý jeden kúsok Evanjelia je čokoľvek, ale nie je nudný.
It's either exciting,
je buď nejak napínavý,
or it puts a question mark in our head, we don't understand it.
Alebo v nás budzuje otázku, lebo my nerozumieme.
Sometimes it's provocative.
Niekedy nás provokuje.
Like this week, we have this passage where Jesus said, I didn't come to bring peace.
Napríklad tento týždeň v Evanjeliu raz Ježiš hovorí, že neprišiel som, aby som priniesol pokoj.
So we should, deal with it, we should talk about it, pray about it, exchange our thoughts about it, put it in the context, but it's certainly not boring.
Takže sú to veci, o ktorých sa musíme rozprávať, zdieľať, ktoré musíme dať do kontextu, ale určite nie sú nudné.
And boring can mean everything. So it can mean liturgy or community life or your church paper, your website. Ask yourself, is it boring or exciting?
A to slovo nudné sa môže vzťahovať na rôzne veci, na liturgiu, na vašu farskú webovú stránku, na podujatie.
And I mean, I'm bringing us to Athens because you are the people who work with children, and when you work with children, you see very, very quickly, is it boring or not?
A ja teraz nosím drevo do lesa, lebo vy ste ľudia, ktorí pracujú s deťmi, prídete a veľmi rýchlo spoznáte, keď je niečo nudné.
And it's not so hard to be excited.
A vlastne nie je už také ťažké byť nadšený, napínaný.
Then some messages are irrelevant. That's a big problem.
Niektoré posolstvá už nie sú relevantné, to je veľký problém.
Some people leave because they say that has nothing to do with my life. I don't understand it. It's too complicated or it's irrelevant. My life is completely different. So what Pater Milan said about Gaudium Peace, so the hopes and the joys and the sorrows of the people of today should be our hopes and joys and sorrows.
Takže mnohí ľudia hovoria, že mnohí ľudia odchádzajú preto, lebo to neprehovára ich životom, hovoria, že žijú niečo úplne iné. Takže práve preto radosti a aj strasti tých ľudí, ktorých spoznávame, sa musia stať aj našimi.
That's why it's wonderful. You and I told me yesterday about the initiative of helping children and young people and families to deal with the digital age, smartphones and addiction.
A preto je nádherná napríklad tá iniciatíva, v ktorej eRko pomáha deťom, mladým ľuďom, rodinám vysporiadať sa s digitálnymi technológiami.
Yeah, in a helpful way, not moralistically.
Takže je to pre nich nápomocné, ale nie moralizujúce.
So if we take our lives, the lives of our fellow people as the basis of our pastoral work, that's the Christian and the path, that's the way Jesus chose.
Takže keď si ako základ tej našej pastoračnej činnosti zoberieme naše životy našich priateľov, tak to je to, čo máme robiť, to je to, ako konal aj Ježiš.
And some actions we have to admit, church actions are pharisaical, so we lift us up above others. That's what Pope Francis denounces as negative clericalism.
Niektoré skutky sú ako skutky farizejov, to je napríklad aj to, o čom hovorí pápež František, keď hovorí o klerikalizme.
And from my innovative focus, it has to do with how we deal with others who believe and think and live differently.
A teda z môjho inovačného pohľadu je to otázka, že ako sa vysporadúvame a komunikujeme s tými, ktorí sú iní, ktorí veria niečomu inému.
And the last thing, a lot of these young generations, at least, and I'm mostly active in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, they don't feel they belong, whatever church does. It's like, well, I don't even know about it, or if I do, I never get the idea I should join or I should be part of it.
A potom posledná vec, moja skúsenosť hlavne z Rakúska a Nemecka, kde som aktívny. Mladí mladí ľudia z generácie Z nemajú pocit, že patria k cirkvi. Buď hovoria, že vôbec neviem, čo sa jedná, alebo som nemal pocit, že by som sa mal zapojiť.
And here are just a few statistics. For instance, this is the US in the last 15 years. But the only group that grew were the nuns that said we are not religious anymore. Everybody else, the Catholic Church, the Evangelical Church, the mainstream Protestants, you know, in the US there's a supermarket of religions, they have all decreased, all of them.
To je jedna štatistika graf o príslušnosti k rôznym náboženstvám. Vidíte, že tá červená čiara, jediná, ktorá narastla, to je bez vierovyznania.
And the nuns, the non-religious, they're above average young people.
A v tejto kategórii bez vierovyznania je nadpriemerne veľa mladých ľudí.
And the reasons we said before are the main reasons that studies show why the situation is like this. Or this is from Germany, where they say that the combined numbers of Lutheran, so Protestant and Catholics, is decreasing. This is very schematic, but they said in 2018, and now we are here, and the numbers are pretty much accurate.
Tento graf ukazuje spoločné sčítaný počet ľudí, ktorí boli v katolíckej a evangelickej cirkvi a tiež vlastne čísla zodpovedajú tomu, ako je to na tomto grafe.
And just to let you know, this blue field here, that's what we can influence. So some is demographic, but a lot of it we could influence, whether it goes this way or that way.
A tá oranžová červená časť faktorov je demografická, ale tá modrá časť to je to, čo my môžeme ovplyvniť. Ďalšie faktory.
But even worse than the numbers, because the numbers are not that important if you just look at the quantities, you have to look at the quality. The main quality between church and the country you live in is their confidence, is their trust. And this shows you here, the Catholic Church in Austria there is something like a trust index that's measured every year. And it's the equation of do I trust yes or no? And so it's minus 30. It used to be like plus 20 or something, 30, 40 years ago.
Takže musíme sa pozerať nielen na tie samotné čísla, nielen na kvantitu, ale aj na kvalitu. A jedna z najdôležitejších vlastností je tá dôvera medzi cirkvou a ľuďmi. A je to niečo ako index dôvery, ktorý je meraný, toto sú rakúske čísla, je meraný každý rok a vlastne hovorí o tom, že ako veľmi alebo málo ľudia dôverujú cirkvi. A vidíte, že tretia od spodu je katolícka cirkev minus 30 a vezmeme si, že pred asi 30-40 rokmi to bolo plus 20.
Only two are worse, it's the government and social media.
Už len dve sú horšie, vláda a sociálne médiá v Rakúsku.
So if you lose trust, if people don't trust you, then you can, I don't know, invite to all kinds of super actions and events they won't cut, or they won't believe you, or you can preach the best messages if there is no confidence, no trust, no relationship, basically, it's not possible. So that's something I think that through the synodal process became totally clear. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Cez ten synodálny proces sa veľmi jasne ukázalo, že ak ľudia stratia voči sebe dôveru, môžu robiť tie najlepšie podujatia, môžu mať tie najzaujímavejšie posolstvá a oni neprídu.
Because when trust deteriorates or is broken, that happens quickly, or it's a long process, but whatever it is, rebuilding it needs fundamental change.
A keď sa stratí dôvera, alebo sa s ňou niečo stane, to môže byť rýchly proces, ale navrátiť ju naspäť, to potrebuje veľkú inováciu.
It belongs to the statics of the church building, so to speak.
Dôvera patrí, alebo je jedným zo základných kameňov cirkvi, tej statiky.
So one thing is, everybody talks about the great resignation. That means, not just in the church world, it started in the normal economic world, that suddenly there were too few employees. So the workforce was decreasing.
Takže prvá vec, na ktorú sme sa mali zamerať, je veľká rezignácia. A to nie je teraz iba v tom cirkevnom svete, ale aj v tom sekulárnom svete. Teraz bolo málo zamestnancov, málo ľudí, ktorí chceli čo robiť.
And in Austria and in Germany, a long time, the church thought, well, we have not enough priests, but there are enough theologians and religious teachers or volunteers, but we have a lack of priests. And now they realize that's not true. We have a lack at every level of people who engage in the church.
Nejaký čas v Nemecku mysleli, že máme dostatok kňazov, ale máme dostatok sú teológovia, učitelia náboženstva, dobrovoľníci, ale potom si uvedomili, že nie, že nedostatok je na všetkých úrovniach.
But there are a few examples of churches, local churches or movements like eRko and others that grow. And those that grow have one thing in common. They focus on the question, what does discipleship mean today? How can we live it today?
Ale je niekoľko hnutí alebo inštitúcií a farností, ktoré sa aj zväčšujú, ktoré rastú a tie majú jednu vec, tie majú jednu spoločnú vec. A to je aspekt toho, že sme učeníkmi a ako môžeme žiť toto učeníctvo dnes.
The second thing is we experience that for many people it's harder and harder to have a normal discussion about topics where you have a different opinion.
Druhá vec, začína to byť pre väčšinu ľudí ťažšie a ťažšie mať úplne normálnu diskusiu o témach, ktoré nás možno rozdeľujú.
So it's more and more important to say what we theologically call the unity in the Spirit. What does it mean in this situation? How can we be the sacrament, the tool and the sign for God's love and the unity of mankind among each other? As Lumenkensi.
Tak v kontexte cirkvi je to tá jednota v duchu svetom a je to pre nás otázka, že ako sa my sami môžeme stať tou sviatosťou, tým svetlom a láskou Ducha Svätého. Because Jesus said, if you just love those that love you, don't the non-believers do that too. Lebo Ježiš povedal, že ak milujete iba tých, ktorí vás milujú, čo robíte, že to robia tí, ktorí neveria. So unity is not uniformity, it's always unity in plurality. Takže to je to, čo je jednota. Jednota vždycky zahŕňa aj tú rôznorodosť a pluralitu našich. And the third topic, what we call the Constantinian Church. So the Roman Emperor Constantine, first he allowed the church, it wasn't forbidden anymore, and then his successor made it to the state religion. And we're still living in that phase for 1700 years, but it's nearing its end, that phase of the church. A teraz posledná vec je koniec niečoho ako konštantínskej cirkvi, teda to znamená, keď sa zoberieme cisára Konštantína, za ktorého bola cirkev pluralitná, ale potom sa stala štátnym náboženstvom a teraz sme vlastne v epoche, keď sa to zakončuje, keď to padá. So even in our countries that have been influenced by the church very intensely for centuries, church life and normal life and the political life, they were just somehow interconnected. It was normal to be a Catholic and all that things that they, on different levels, but they come to an end or they change very strongly. And it becomes more and more a situation of diaspora, where we are a minority in a minority house among the other houses. Takže v mnohých krajinách, o ktorých vieme, že cirkev v nich mala veľkú úlohu a ovplyvňovala politický, osobný aj štátny život, začína sa to pomaly preklápať do života diaspor, kde sme ako veriaci, ako menšina. And growing churches don't regret that process. They say, what does God tell us with it? And so they don't try to revitalize the dying part of church, but to focus on the growing part of church. And there are many new plants, so to speak, in the big
forest of church that are already growing. And like Isaiah says, don't you see them?
Ale tí, ktorí vlastne sa venujú obnove cirkvi a tomu rastu v nej, z toho nie sú smutní, pretože hovoria, že nemáme sa zameriavať na to, čo zomiera, a tým sa zachrániť tú zomierajúcu cirkev, ale podporiť tú cirkev, ktorá vyrastá. A vlastne vidíme, že je tu veľa tých rastliniek, stromčekov v tom lese cirkvi.
So they see it as a normal circle of life. Every living being, whether it's a plant or an animal or a human, has its time where it starts very little and then grows and is still dependent on others, then enters its adult life, fruitful life, and then the fruitful phase ends and the dying phase starts. That's normal.
Takže vnímajú to ako úplne bežný cyklus života, čo sú to rastliny alebo živočíchy, keď niečo začína veľmi maličké, toto potrebuje podporu ostatných, nastúpi to do života, dospelosti, kde to prináša ovocie.
And these many parables of Jesus about the seeds and about the fruits and the plants applies to the church too as a living organism.
Tým pádom aj všetky podobenstvá, ktoré Ježiš hovoril o tých semienkach, vieme ich aplikovať aj na život cirkvi.
So the church itself will prevail, but different forms of churches will come and go and others will start again. It's always been like this in the whole history.
Takže cirkev ako taká pretrvá, ale tie formy sa zmenia, budú sa meniť, tak to bolo v celej histórii cirkvi.
So let's pray to God that He might open our eyes so we don't just see maybe the big old trees that are not fruitful anymore and maybe dying, and that's okay, but that He may make us see the little plants that are already growing here and there, sometimes within our traditional church life, sometimes even outside or with partners.
Tak sa musíme modliť, aby Boh otvoril naše oči, aby sme nevideli iba tie veľké, teraz už zomierajúce stromy, ale aby sme kde tu uvideli aj tie rastlinky, ktoré rašia, ktoré nám môžu pomôcť.
Because the Spirit blows wherever it wants. It's free. Let's hope and pray for the Spirit.
Pretože tu tvoje kam chce je úplne voľný, tak dúfajme a modlíme sa.
So, the first, a little story. Those two guys, Lewis and Clark are their names, made an expedition from the east of US to the west coast.
Takže jeden príbeh Lewis a Clark, ktorí boli na expedícii zo západu až z východu až na západné pobrežie USA.
From the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean.
Takže od Atlantického k Tichomu oceánu.
Thomas Jefferson was the third president and he gave them this assignment.
Keď bol Thomas Jefferson ako tretí prezident USA, tak im dal túto úlohu.
And they prepared very well for years.
A veľmi dobre sa pripravovali na túto úlohu mnohé roky.
Both of them were very different types. One was more theoretical, the other was rather practical.
A tí dvaja boli veľmi rôzne typy, jeden viacej praktický, druhý viacej teoretický.
So as we said, innovation is a team sport.
Ako sme povedali, inovácia je tímový šport.
And they thought, of course, the only way we can cross this vast land is via rivers and lakes.
A obaja povedali, že jediný spôsob, ako možno prejsť naprieč touto prírodou je cez rieky a jazera.
Because that it has been like this for thousands of years. Traveling was mostly by sea and water, because there were no roads and no planes.
Pretože takto to bolo po stovky rokov, cestovanie nebolo možné iba po riekach, po vode, pretože neboli cesty.
So like the Mediterranean Sea, for a long time it was uniting and combining the surrounding countries, not separating them like now.
Takže po dlhé roky napríklad Stredozemné more spájalo všetky krajiny, ktoré namiesto toho, aby ich rozdielovalo napríklad po zvyku.
So they prepared canoes and boats and all the stuff they needed and set out on the expedition.
Takže zobrali lode a všetko, čo potrebovali, aby plávali.
And then, after months, they had a lot of problems, a lot of columns in their way. But then came the biggest one.
A po mnohých mesiacoch, v ktorých mali rôzne piliere v ceste, prišiel najväčší z nich.
And that were the Rocky Mountains.
A to boli Rocky Mountains.
A little bit bigger than the Tatra.
Malo trošku väčšie ako Tatry.
Although they are great mountains.
Hoci sú...
I was there on vacation. But, so they had no idea how they can overcome that obstacle.
A nevedeli, ako prekonať, ako prejsť túto prekážku.
And then they met a woman, Satchayavaya.
A potom stretli ženu, Satchayavaya sa volá.
That's a column of her. A young Indian woman with a baby here on her back. And the amazing thing was, those two old men trusted that young woman.
A tuto vidíme jej sochu, bola to mladá indiánska žena s dieťaťom. Úžasná vec bola, že títo dvaja muži na expedícii jej dôverovali.
They found out that she had a lot of competences.
Zistili, že má veľa zručností.
And they were open for her advice. A woman, young, from the wild Indians.
A naozaj boli otvorení jej rade mladej indiánskej ženy niekde z divočiny.
And to make a long story short, her advice helped them not only to survive, but overcome the Rocky Mountains.
Aby som to povedal v skratke, tá jej rada im pomohla nielen prežiť, ale dokonca prekonať tie Rocky Mountains.
But they had to change their mindset.
Ale museli zmeniť svoj náhľad.
You cannot cross the mountains with canoes.
Nie je možné prekonať vrchy na kanóe, na lodiach.
So they had to give up the traditional ways, methods that had, prevailed for thousands of years.
Takže sa museli vzdať tých tradičných metód, ktoré prevládali po stáročia.
To reach their final goal, the Pacific Ocean.
Aby sa dostali tých cieľov, ktoré si stanovili k tomu Tichému oceánu.
So if you have time, read the story. There will be in a presentation that you get more of it.
Tak ak máte čas, prečítajte si ten príbeh, bude to v prezentácii, ako sa volá.
But the question that I want to give you for when you go home, from whom could you learn about life and its obstacles and chances that you don't expect?
Ale otázka, ktorú vám chcem položiť, aby ste na ňom rozmýšľali aj neskôr doma, od koho sa vy môžete učiť o živote, ale aj o prekážkach a možnostiach v ňom.
As personal testimony, we have 3 kids, all grown up. And 2 of them left the church. They really left the church. The youngest one is still a member of the church and active in the church, but not in the way I was. And that somehow it hurts me and my wife. And on the other side, we are trying to stay in a very, very close relationship and listen to one another and learn from one another. And I've learned very, very much. I'm still learning about the modern world from them.
Takže jeden príklad, napríklad ja mám 3 deti, 2 z nich úplne opustili cirkev a to tretie najmladšie je ešte aktívne v cirkvi, ale nie tak, ako som napríklad ja bol, keď som bol mladý. A táto skutočnosť nás dosť zraňuje s mojou manželkou a napriek tomu, čo sa pokúšame, je zostať s nimi v blízkom kontakte a ja som sa vďaka tomu naučil veľmi veľa o modernom svete a stále sa učím.
So that's to encourage you. If there are people in your life who live differently, who think differently, but try to build up a relationship and in this spirit of listening and trust that even in such persons could be what God wants to tell you, could be the remedy against the obstacles.
Tak toto je moje povzbudenie pre vás. Ak sú vo vašom živote tiež ľudia, ktorí rozmýšľajú iným spôsobom, nadväzujte s nimi vzťahy, učte sa od nich, lebo aj ich hlas môže byť hlasom, ktorým vám hovorí Boh a môže byť tým, čo zmetie tie prekážky.
And by the way, if you look at Jesus' example, that's exactly what he did. He didn't choose the people that the leaders, religious leaders of his times expected.
Keď sa pozrieme na Ježiša, to je vlastne to, čo on robil, nie? Že sa stretával napríklad s lídrami v cirkvi v tom čase.
All his disciples, the apostles and the other ones, including women, they were outcasts. They were considered unreligious, unmoral, whatever.
že sa nestretával prioritne s lídrami, ale že všetci jeho učeníci, ženy okolo neho, všetci boli v podstate niekde na spodku toho rebríčka.
But experience Jesus and his love. It always says he looked at people, he embraced people, experiencing how that transformed their lives, that made them become the person God intended them to be.
A títo ľudia stretávali Ježiša, budovali s ním vzťah, často sa píše, že sa na nich pozeral, že ich objímal a táto skúsenosť zmenila ich život.
So let's follow his example.
Takže nasledujeme jeho príklad.
In dealing with others.
V tom, ako sa stretávame s druhými.
So now I'm skipping a few slides. And so this one. So again, a slide, you see something here. It's not a forklift, but can you see what it is? Yes.
Viete, čo je to na obrázku?
It's a special tandem bicycle. That's me and my wife, and we make a lot of trips with that bicycle. It's in our eyes, it's the most innovative tandem. But bicycle, we can both see and other stuff. But when we ride this bicycle, there are two types of reactions.
Takže toto je taký inovatívny tandem, na ktorom veľa jazdíme s mojou manželkou, som ja s mojou manželkou. A keď nás ale ľudia vidia na ňom, tak sú tu dve reakcie, ktorými reagujú.
So just mimicry. The majority looks like this.
Väčšina sa vyzerá takto.
And the minority, mostly kids, look like this.
A väčšinou detí sa pozerajú tak.
Okay. So that's the types of innovations. And this is the famous Rogers bell of innovation.
A toto je známa Rogersová krivka inovácie.
And just one aspect of it, you will read the explanation in the documentary you get, but very few people are really innovators. They have always new ideas how you can improve something.
Bližšie si tomu prečítať materiál, ktoré dostanete, ale jedna vec. Veľmi málo ľudí, iba tie 2,5% na začiatku sú inovátori, ktorí majú stále nové nápady.
Yeah. Doesn't mean that the others don't have ideas, but you know, innovators have a very hard life because whatever they do, they always see chances of improvement and how can you do it better. And I can never, for instance, walk up to a coffee machine without thinking, well, why is this line so long? Couldn't we, you know, whatever, faster and so on.
Nie, že by ostatní ľudia nemali nápady, ale život inovátorov je o to ťažší, že stále konštantne, keď niekde sú, niečo vidia, tak majú nové nápady o tom, ako niečo zlepšiť.
So, of course, such a typology is a simplification.
Takáto typológia je vždy zjednodušenie.
But it's like a map that helps you to find orientation in the landscape.
Ale je to ako mapa, ktorá vám pomôže zorientovať sa v krajine.
And what I want to help you focus on is these so-called early adopters.
A na čo chcem orientovať vašu pozornosť sú tí ľudia, ktorí si veľmi skoro osvoja tú ideu.
Because these are the people that maybe don't have ideas themselves, but they are glad and thankful that there are new ideas, new ways.
Pretože títo skorí osvojitelia sú tí ľudia, ktorí radi príjmú nové idei a to, čo prinášajú.
But if you add them up, it's not even 20%. That means more than 80% in the beginning. Whatever you start to change or renew or innovate, more than 80% in the beginning are skeptical, they keep their distance, they are not helping, they're maybe even against it.
Ale keď sa pozriete, tie dve skupiny na začiatku nie sú ani len 20%, takže na začiatku je väčšinou viac než 80% ľudí skeptických alebo dokonca úplne proti tým novým nápadom.
Love them, but don't put your energy into persuading them.
Milujte ich, ale nedávajte svoju energiu do toho, aby ste ich presvedčili.
But focus on the early adopters, and if it's a group of 20 people, these are maybe 2 or 3 persons.
Svoju energiu investujte do tých ľudí, ktorí na začiatku, ktorí zaujme tá idea, aj keď to bolo 20 ľudí.
And if those people, they like to risk something.
To sú ľudia, ktorí chcú niečo riskovať.
They know something new can fail.
Vedia, že sa niečo môže pokaziť.
You have to try several times.
Hej, vedia, že môžeš niečo spraviť zle, že budeš musieť niečo skúsiť niekoľkokrát.
They have this attitude of little children. They just try it again and again and again.
Majú ten postoj malých detí, že chcú stále znova a znova skúšať.
They don't stand up and fall on the first step and say, walking doesn't work.
Nepadnú po prvom kroku a nepovedia, OK, chodenie nefunguje.
Okay. And then be aware of those, he calls it laggards. They're about the same amount in each system.
Hej, a neverte tým, ktorí sú kvázi oneskorenci, oni sú v každom systéme.
The problem is not that they will always be against you, whatever you do, however positive it is. You can persuade through action these, but not these.
Oni budú v každom systéme a vždycky budú proti tomu, čo prinášate. Môžete presvedčiť tie dve skupiny v strede cez svoje skutky, ale tých 16% vždy ostane proti.
The problem is not that they still don't have a smartphone, don't watch TV or whatever.
Problém nie je, že stále nemajú telefóny, nepozerajú televíziu a podobne.
There are good reasons for that.
Sú na to dobré dôvody.
But the problem is they are very loud.
A problém je, že sú veľmi hlasní.
So when I worked with our bishop, he would, after this action with the veiled crosses, he would call me and say, "There are so many emails protesting against this action. We have to stop it."
Keď som spolupracoval s našim biskupom na tej akcii so zahaľovaním krížov, tak prišiel za mnou a hovoril mi, je tu strašne veľa e-mailov s protestami proti tejto akcii.
And I said, okay, I'm coming over to your office, show me the emails. There were maybe 4 or 5 or 10.
A potom som mu povedal, dobre, tak zoberte ma do kancelárie a ukážte mi tie e-maily. Nakoniec boli 4, 5 alebo možno 10.
And he thought that's the majority.
Ale som myslel, že to je väčšina.
So they're very loud. They protest and they appear as being dominant, but they're not.
A oni teda veľmi hlasno protestovali a zdalo sa, že sú dominantní, ale v skutočnosti nie sú.
Okay, so I'm coming to the end of my presentation with a short video that's in my eyes very touching. It has nothing to do with church. It was made by TV Denmark, which is a very pluralistic and secular society. But in my eyes it presents in a secular way the vision of the kingdom of God starting to rise among our societies.
A zakončím jedným videom, ktoré vytvorila televízia v Dánsku, čo je veľmi pluralitná a sekulárna spoločnosť, ale podľa mňa to veľmi dobre ukazuje to, ako by sme mali prinašať Božie kráľovstvo.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
Let's build such a society, such a world where everybody is recognized as a child of God, as His creation. And I think, however big we are as churches, how many numbers we have, we can be a salt in society. Thank you very much.
Ktorá takto uzná každého jedného ako Božie dieťa. Ďakujem za pozornosť.